continue to, as the news unfolds up here related to oil and gas and a lot of other issues. But when we look across, I think the possibilities today are quite unique. This generation, our generation, those alive today, have the opportunity to totally alter the direction in which we're going. And consciousness and how we sort of adapt to the technologies we've created and in fact, solve the problems that we've also created are going to require a whole new kind of thinking. And this is what was interesting is this leap, this idea that, forget about the idea of manipulating. And we understand that. I mean, can you imagine, as an example, if people's full conscious ability were unleashed? And let me give you the example, and I think we've used it before, but it's just such a good one. And it's, if you take the supercomputers of today and you string three of them together, you can map in real time a three-dimensional image of a neuron firing in the brain, a whole neuron firing chain. And that's a lot of computing power. I mean, each one of those supercomputers does 280 teraflops a second, more or less. And this is equal to 6.6 billion people with hand calculators every 5 seconds doing a calculation for 60 hours to do what one of those do in a second. So it's a lot of numbers crunching. Now think about it. And yet it only can capture one neuron firing chain in real time in the human brain, which, is what does that tell you about the human brain in terms of what it's doing? Oh, it's amazing. I mean, the capability, it's a quantum computer. We each have one on our shoulders, and a quantum computer, by illustration, would have the capability, by comparison, if we ran that supercomputer I just described for 1 trillion years, 1 trillion years ran that supercomputer. Think of all those people with hand calculators.
Absolutely. And in my case, we're dealing with 1950 computer technology in my head.
Right. Well, and here's the thing, though, is it gets down to, at that rate, in 1 hour, that's what a quantum computer will do, what a supercomputer will do in 1 trillion years. And so this next breakthrough in science, which I believe we're going to see, there's some things that have happened the last year or so, and then brain modeling becomes something very different, because then you're looking at things like complete memory sets. Now imagine that. And this is the direction in which a lot of the research has been headed since at least as far back as the 1980s. And the idea of, for learning, accelerated learning. If it's neutral like mathematics, maybe that would be interesting. But if it's, if it has values based in it, you're basically dumping information directly into consciousness in a way where it's not discriminated, sorted out by your experiences.
Well, how would you like to go to bed, and you speak English, wake up, and you also speak Spanish or Arabic or French or Russian, because you're able to get this downloaded into your head? I mean, wouldn't that be incredible?
I think so. And as long as you could do it in a way that was in conformity with your normal value systems. And why that's important is it's important that however you load information in that frames the way you're going to act, that it conforms to some orderly system of beliefs. And that's, again, where the input becomes very important. I can say dog as an example, and some people get warm, fuzzy feelings, and some people get gripped with fear, depending on their experiences and what they associated with those word symbols, if you will. So the programming is important, and, this is going to come. The idea, there's a paper that was done in June 2004. It was in Technology Horizons, which is the Air Force Research Labs publication, and the Electromagnetic Directorate of the Air Force did this article on controlled effects. And they're trying to recreate the full 5 senses, sight, taste, touch, smell, sound, be able to get all 5 senses and be able to create synthetic experiences that are so real you can't distinguish them from the synthetic. Being able to interact or couple with consciousness and the mind in a way that you can literally take control of the equipment operator. I mean, as a military objective, as opposed to just knocking out equipment.
Here's another thing, too, that could happen. I mean, we keep thinking of this Orwellian future. What happens if all this capability is going to happen, and I believe it will be attainable, and all of a sudden they decide to program all of us their way, and that is conform, don't argue, put your guns down, whatever we say, you do. And from the moment you're a baby, let's say, they just start plugging this stuff in, whether it's in the form of a chip in your head or some way to download it into your brain. They get all of us in time. Isn't that possible, and isn't that frightening?
Well, it is possible, but it's not even necessary to have implantable technology, because you can, in fact, carry a signal below the audible range of hearing and have a tremendous effect. In fact, there's a very simple technology that was developed and patented. It was just used in Japan for dissuading shoplifters. And in 7 languages below the level of conscious hearing, they recite the messages to not steal and so on, and they result in about a 40% reduction in theft. And the reason it's probably only 40% is most theft is by professionals who have suspended their subconscious. They don't listen anymore, and that's what they do. But the people that do listen probably do account for about 40%, and that consequently did have a pretty tremendous effect. But the idea of sub-audible signals, or the idea that other signals can be carried on virtually any electromagnetic carrier, that right now can alter emotional state, and then you can, based on that, you can just put overt messages on that take advantage of that altered state. So you could make people generally upset, for instance, and then on the news broadcast issue a message indicting some group for all of your woes, and a certain amount of the population would turn that anger and direct it in that way. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things that actually get proposed. That concept was actually in a paper by Persinger from Laurentian University back in 1995, that you could create these kinds of signals that would be able to manipulate behavior in that way.
Since 9/11, here's my personal little research project on you, Nick, because there's a method here behind my madness. Since 9/11, do you think, and here we are today, here we are 2008, going on 7 years, do you think that Nick Begich lost a little piece of himself over the last 7 years?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Just fatigue.
I think we all have.
Yeah.
I think Americans have lost something in these double whammies with the economy and the ongoing war and everything else has just about deflated people. We'll get it when we open up the phone lines. I think people have been smacked up against the ropes so much now that they don't even know how to swing back anymore. And I can feel it. And I bet if I talk to 100 people, 95% of them would just say what you just did, that you feel deflated.
Yeah, at the same time, though, I am still optimistic, because when you consider the possibility of even just a few fully engaged minds on this planet, a lot can happen. And it happens from the most obscure places. Nothing, if you look historically on the great things, whether they were in religion, science, politics, or business, they happened by the maverick. They didn't come out of the mainstream. It happened out of the left field, out of the desert.
Well, I agree with you. I'm not giving up either. We'll be back in a moment, because we can win this battle. Let's talk about ESP, extrasensory perception, when we come back on Coast to Coast AM.